The world had celebrated the end of the nightmare. For months, news outlets flashed headlines of dwindling infection rates, entire cities declared safe, and survivors returning cautiously to rebuild. Dead America, the land that once felt swallowed by death and decay, had begun to show signs of life again. People ventured outside their barricaded homes. Stores reopened. Streets that once echoed with the groans of the undead were now filled with the cautious chatter of the living. It was a fragile hope, but hope nonetheless. In the small town of Havens Creek, nestled between sprawling forests and abandoned highways, life was slowly finding its rhythm again. The residents, those lucky enough to survive the dark days, worked together to clear debris, repair homes, and plant gardens. Children tentatively played in the streets, their laughter a sound long missed. Among the survivors was Rachel Mason, a former nurse who had spent countless sleepless nights tending to the injured during the outbreak. Her sharp eyes scanned the horizon every morning, wary despite the calm. Rachel wasn't alone in her vigilance. A small community of survivors had settled into Havens Creek, united by shared trauma and the dream of normalcy. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. Supplies were still scarce, trust remained a precious commodity, and the scars of loss ran deep. One crisp autumn morning, Rachel stood atop the roof of the old town hall, binoculars in hand, watching for any signs of trouble. The landscape stretched wide and empty, save for the occasional bird fluttering through the barren trees. Her gaze drifted to the forest edge, where shadows seemed unusually thick. Something felt off. A gut instinct she couldn't shake whispered of danger lurking unseen. Back inside the town hall, Mayor Frank Delaney gathered a meeting of the community's key members. His face was lined with fatigue, but his voice carried the weight of responsibility. "We've come a long way, but we can't afford to be complacent," he warned. "Reports from other settlements tell us the dead are still out there. Fewer, yes, but not gone. And there are other threats. Things we didn't expect." Murmurs filled the room. Fear was a constant visitor, no matter how much they tried to push it away. Rachel listened intently. She had learned the hard way that survival wasn't just about fighting the undead, it was about battling the unknown. That evening, as darkness blanketed Havens Creek, Rachel made her rounds with her friend and former military officer, Marcus. They checked barricades, ensured the generator was functioning, and reassured the nervous residents. But when they reached the edge of town near the old railway yard, an eerie silence gripped them. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed from the woods, low, almost imperceptible. A soft rustling that didn't belong to the wind. Rachel's heart pounded as she motioned for Marcus to stay alert. They edged closer, flashlights slicing through the shadows. Then, from the darkness, a figure stumbled forward. Not a full zombie, but something wrong. Its movements were hesitant, as if caught between life and death. It collapsed just feet from them, barely conscious but with eyes that held a terrifying emptiness. Rachel knelt beside the figure, pulling out her medical kit. The man's skin was pale, almost translucent, and his breath shallow. Who are you?" she asked softly. He managed a weak whisper, "Not safe. They're not all dead." Before they could press further, a guttural noise sounded from deeper in the forest. The figure's eyes widened with dread before he slipped into unconsciousness. Marcus scanned the tree line, tension rising. "We need to get him back to town. Now." As they hurried back, Rachel's mind raced. What if the outbreak hadn't truly ended? What if the virus had mutated, hidden in ways they never imagined? The nightmare they'd fought so hard to escape might only be beginning a new chapter, one with threats far more insidious than the shambling dead. Back at the medical station, Rachel worked through the night trying to stabilize their mysterious visitor. He was barely alive, and tests showed abnormalities, signs of infection unlike anything she'd seen before. The virus had changed. This wasn't a typical walker bite or turn. Meanwhile, in the town's communication room, Frank and the tech volunteer, Jenna, intercepted unsettling transmissions from other settlements. Many had gone silent, others reported strange sightings, groups of people acting strangely aggressive, odd illnesses that didn't match the initial infection. The community faced a chilling reality: the apocalypse wasn't over. It had evolved. Rachel and Marcus prepared to lead an expedition to uncover what was lurking beyond their borders. Supplies were gathered, weapons checked, and plans made to move quietly and cautiously. As dawn broke over Havens Creek, a sense of urgency replaced the fragile calm. The survivors braced themselves, realizing that safety was an illusion. The hidden threats of dead America were stirring, and they would need every ounce of courage, wit, and unity to survive what was coming next. End of Part 1. Would you like me to continue with Part 2? The early morning light filtered through the cracked windows of the town hall, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor. Rachel stood near the map table, tracing the possible routes beyond Havens Creek with her finger. Every path led deeper into uncertainty. Every step beyond the familiar was a gamble with their lives. Marcus entered, his expression grim but resolute. We can't wait any longer. If the infection is mutating, if there are survivors turning on each other, or worse, something new, we need to know. The longer we stay isolated, the more vulnerable we become. A small group had volunteered to join the reconnaissance team. Each carried the weight of loss and the flickering hope of preventing another tragedy. Among them was Sarah, a resourceful scout with a keen eye for danger, Daniel, a quiet mechanic whose hands could fix almost anything, and Leah, a medic whose steady hands had saved more lives than anyone could count. Their plan was simple but dangerous: head northeast toward the last known settlement that had radioed a distress call weeks ago, Stonebridge. Beyond that lay thick forests and abandoned highways, territory no one dared traverse after dark. As they packed supplies, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The town felt too quiet, the kind of silence that fills the air just before a storm breaks. When the group set out, the streets of Havens Creek were eerily still. The only sounds were the crunch of boots on gravel and the rustle of wind through dead leaves. The sun climbed higher as they moved cautiously, weapons at the ready. Hours passed, and the landscape changed. The neat rows of homes gave way to overgrown fields, skeletal trees bending under the weight of decay. They spotted remnants of the past, abandoned cars, broken signs, remnants of lives interrupted. As they approached the forest's edge, Sarah signaled them to halt. Her eyes scanned the shadows. Something's not right. Tracks, human, but fresh. And scattered. Could be a group, or something else. Daniel knelt to inspect the ground, his brows furrowed. These don't look like regular survivors. The spacing, the erratic pattern, like they were running or being chased. Leah checked her watch. We should set up a perimeter before nightfall. No telling what waits in these woods. Reluctantly, they agreed to camp near the edge, erecting makeshift defenses from fallen branches and rocks. The forest seemed to breathe around them, a living entity watching silently. That night, around a flickering campfire, Rachel shared what they'd learned from the visitor back at Havens Creek. He spoke of shadows, people who look human but aren't quite right. He called them the lurkers. Said they hide in the dark, watching, waiting. Marcus scowled. Stories to scare kids. But if there's even a chance they're real, we need to be prepared. The group's unease grew. As the firelight danced across their faces, strange noises echoed from the trees, whispers, footsteps, something skittering just beyond sight. Suddenly, a sharp snap echoed nearby. Everyone froze. Sarah tightened her grip on her rifle, eyes darting toward the darkness. We're not alone, she whispered. Minutes stretched into an eternity as the group strained to listen. Then, a chilling howl shattered the silence, sending a wave of dread crashing over them. Daniel's voice was barely audible. That wasn't a walker. Not any sound I've heard before. Rachel's heart pounded. Whatever was out there, it was no longer just the dead they feared. The hidden threats lurking in dead America were changing the rules. With dawn still hours away, the team knew they had to move carefully, every step a gamble between survival and becoming the hunted. End of Part 2. The first light of dawn barely pierced the dense canopy of the forest. The air was thick with moisture and the heavy scent of decay. Rachel rubbed the sleep from her eyes, but unease gripped her like a vice. The night's howls and whispered movements had left an invisible weight on the group's shoulders. They broke camp quietly, moving deeper into the woods where the trees grew tall and the shadows darker. Every sound, crackling twig, rustling leaf, made them jump, hearts pounding in their chests. The forest felt alive with unseen eyes, watching their every move. Sarah led the way, her steps sure but cautious. She had grown up near these woods and knew how to read the subtle signs of danger. Yet even she seemed unsettled. As they pressed forward, Daniel scanned the perimeter constantly, his hands ready on his makeshift spear. Leah followed closely behind, clutching a medical kit that felt heavier with each passing hour. Suddenly, Sarah halted, raising a hand. "Wait." She knelt by the ground, pointing at a series of strange marks carved into a tree trunk, symbols that seemed intentionally etched. "What is that?" Rachel asked. "No idea," Sarah replied, eyes narrowing. "Could be a warning. Or a trap." Marcus stepped forward, his military instincts kicking in. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into." Minutes later, the eerie silence shattered again. From the underbrush, figures emerged, not shambling zombies, but something disturbingly close. Their eyes gleamed with unnatural light, their movements fluid and silent. The lurkers. They weren't like any walkers Rachel had seen before. These creatures moved with a predatory grace, blending into shadows, their faces twisted in expressions of hunger and cunning. They were neither fully alive nor dead, trapped in some horrific in-between. The group froze, breaths caught in their throats. One lurker stepped forward, its gaze locking onto Rachel's. A low growl rumbled from its throat, then it vanished into the shadows with a speed that defied logic. Marcus whispered, "They're watching us. Hunting us." Panic rippled through the group. The lurkers weren't just passive threats, they were intelligent, coordinated, and deadly. Rachel rallied them. "We can't outrun them forever. We need to find Stonebridge and figure out what's happening before it's too late." As they moved cautiously on, strange signs of the lurkers' presence grew more obvious: disturbed earth, shattered branches, and the unmistakable stench of something rotten mixed with a faint metallic tang. Hours later, the survivors stumbled upon the outskirts of Stonebridge. The town looked like a ghost town, burned-out cars littered the streets, windows shattered, and doors hung open on broken hinges. Rachel's heart sank. This was no safe haven. Inside a boarded-up diner, they found evidence of a frantic struggle. Notes scrawled on walls warned of betrayal, of friends turning against each other, and of lurkers infiltrating the population. Leah found a battered radio, faintly crackling with static and a garbled voice repeating a desperate message: "Don't trust the living, they've changed, they're infected." The words chilled them. Rachel looked at her companions, the weight of the moment settling over them. The nightmare they'd fought to survive wasn't just about the dead, it was about the hidden threats that had found new ways to torment humanity. As shadows lengthened over Stonebridge, the survivors prepared for the long, dangerous night ahead. They would soon learn that in dead America, the greatest enemy was not always the one you could see. End of Part 3. Ready for Part 4? The sun sank low over Stonebridge, casting long shadows through the broken streets. The survivors gathered inside the battered diner, its walls scarred with desperate messages and warnings. The flickering light of a makeshift lantern revealed faces drawn tight with exhaustion and fear. Rachel paced the room, her mind racing. The message on the radio haunted her: "Don't trust the living, they've changed." What could it mean? Had the virus evolved to infect not just the dead but the living as well? Or was it something else, something more sinister? Marcus leaned against the counter, his eyes scanning the dark windows. "We need to be ready for anything. If the lurkers can move silently among us, hiding in plain sight, then anyone could be a threat." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I've heard stories from other survivors. Groups turning on each other, paranoia spreading like wildfire. People losing themselves, acting strange, violent. It's not just infection. It's something in their minds." Leah nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she checked supplies. "If that's true, how do we know we're safe?" Or that one of us won't change. Daniel stared at the floor, his usual quiet demeanor shattered by the weight of their situation. We're running out of time. If we stay here, we risk being surrounded. If we leave, we don't know what's waiting outside. Rachel looked at each of them, her resolve hardening. We're in this together. We watch each other's backs. But we can't let fear tear us apart. Suddenly, a noise from outside snapped everyone's attention to the shattered door, a faint tapping, deliberate and rhythmic. Marcus raised his rifle slowly. Rachel motioned for silence as she crept toward the door. Peering through a crack in the wood, she saw a figure standing just beyond the threshold, tattered clothes, face obscured by dirt and shadow. "Who's there?" she called softly. The figure lifted their hands in a gesture of peace. "Please. I'm alone. I'm not infected." A tense moment passed before Rachel stepped aside to let the stranger in. The newcomer stumbled inside, eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. "My name is Eli," he said, voice shaking. "I was part of the Stonebridge group. Most of us, we didn't make it. The lurkers, they're not just monsters. They're controlling people, turning them against each other." He glanced around nervously. "There's more than just infection now. There's something worse, something that hides in the mind." Rachel's heart sank. The horror was deeper than she feared. As Eli shared his story, it became clear the survivors were facing not only physical threats but psychological ones. The lurkers were manipulating people, spreading mistrust and chaos. The real battle wasn't just survival, it was holding on to what made them human. That night, the survivors took turns keeping watch. Every creak of the old diner made their nerves tighten. Trust was fragile, and the shadow of betrayal loomed large. Rachel lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. The nightmare they thought was over had only just begun. Dead America still held secrets, and they would have to uncover every one if they wanted to survive. End of Part 4. Dawn crept quietly over Stonebridge, but the town felt heavy with the weight of its recent tragedies. The survivors gathered what little strength they had left, preparing to venture deeper into the heart of the ruined settlement. Every step forward felt like walking through a graveyard of hopes. Rachel's mind raced with questions. If the lurkers were capable of influencing the minds of the living, what hope did they have? Could they trust Eli, or was he another piece in a deadly game? Marcus kept his weapon close, his military training pushing him to stay alert. "We'll stick together. No one goes off alone. Keep your eyes open for any signs, anything unusual." Sarah scanned the empty streets with sharp eyes. "We need to find the source of those transmissions. That radio message wasn't random. Someone, something, is trying to send a warning." Leah distributed the dwindling supplies, her touch gentle but firm. "If the infection has evolved, we need to be prepared for new dangers, physical and mental." As the group moved cautiously through Stonebridge's shattered buildings, they stumbled upon a small community center converted into a makeshift lab. Inside, scattered papers and broken equipment told a story of frantic research and desperation. Rachel picked up a weathered notebook, its pages filled with notes about the infection's strange new symptoms, changes in brain activity, unexplained aggression, and signs of mind control. "This isn't just a virus," Rachel whispered. "It's something more, something engineered." Daniel's voice was steady but grim. Maybe the apocalypse wasn't an accident. Maybe it was planned. Before they could ponder further, a distant scream pierced the air, sending a chill through the group. They exchanged tense glances before rushing toward the source. In a collapsed alleyway, they found a young woman cornered by lurkers, their glowing eyes fixated on her like hunters. Without hesitation, Marcus fired his rifle, scattering the creatures. The woman, breathless and terrified, introduced herself as Maya. She spoke of a hidden enclave deep within the forest where a few survivors had gathered, fighting to reclaim their humanity. "We've learned to resist the lurkers' influence," Maya said urgently. "But we're running out of time. The longer the infection spreads, the harder it is to hold on." Rachel felt a spark of hope. Perhaps the nightmare wasn't endless. Perhaps somewhere in dead America, there was a chance to fight back, not just against the undead, but against the darkness creeping into their minds. As the group prepared to follow Maya toward this sanctuary, the forest around them seemed to whisper warnings, shadows shifting just beyond sight. The true battle was about to begin. End of Part 5. The journey to the hidden enclave was treacherous. Maya led the group through winding forest paths, thick with underbrush and veiled in mist. Every crack of a twig or distant rustle set their nerves on edge, but the promise of sanctuary kept them moving forward. Rachel's thoughts churned as she glanced back at her companions, Marcus scanning ahead with determined eyes, Sarah alert to every sound, Daniel quietly maintaining their few weapons, and Leah ever watchful for signs of injury or illness. As they approached a cluster of cabins nestled deep in the woods, the atmosphere changed. The air felt lighter, less suffocating. Here, the eerie glow of lurker eyes was absent, replaced by cautious but hopeful faces. The enclave was small, perhaps 50 survivors, armed and alert, yet united by a common goal, to resist the infection's sinister reach. Their leader, a stern woman named Eleanor, welcomed Rachel's group with guarded optimism. "We've fought hard to hold this place," Eleanor explained. "We've developed ways to shield our minds from the lurker's influence, using sound, light, and certain herbs. But our resources are limited. We need allies." Rachel nodded, feeling a flicker of relief but knowing better than to let her guard down. "We want to help. But we need to understand what we're really up against." Eleanor led them to a secure room filled with makeshift equipment and data collected over months. Charts showed the infection's patterns, maps marked with lurker sightings, and notes about survivors who had fallen under the dark influence. One chart caught Rachel's eye, a spiraling diagram labeled neurological disruption zones. "The lurkers aren't just infected," Eleanor said. "They're carriers of a parasite that targets the brain's control centers, altering behavior and perception. It's why some survivors turn against their own." Marcus frowned. "So, the infection is evolving. It's not just about survival anymore, it's about battling a mind-altering enemy." Leah added quietly, "And the longer it spreads, the harder it is to distinguish friend from foe." That night, the enclave tightened its defenses. Rachel took watch under a moonless sky, the weight of the world pressing down on her. She realized that the true threat wasn't just the undead or the lurkers, it was the invisible war being waged inside every survivor's mind. Suddenly, a distant howl shattered the silence. The lurkers were near, closer than ever. Rachel's grip tightened on her weapon. The nightmare was far from over, but in this fragile sanctuary, hope flickered faintly, just enough to keep fighting. End of Part 6. Would you like to move on to Part 7? Days passed inside the enclave, a fragile bubble of hope amid the chaos of dead America. But peace was elusive. Every sunrise brought new challenges, scavenging for supplies, fortifying defenses, and fighting the creeping paranoia that gnawed at their minds. Rachel noticed subtle changes in some survivors, small irritations, whispered suspicions, and fleeting moments of anger that flared without cause. The parasite's influence was insidious, wearing down even the strongest wills. One evening, as the group gathered in the common hall, Eleanor addressed them with a grave expression. "We've detected a new strain of the parasite, faster, more aggressive. It's capable of overriding the mental shields we've built. Soon, it may reach everyone here." A hush fell over the room. Fear thickened the air. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. "We can't just wait for the end. We have to take the fight to them." Sarah nodded. "There's a communications tower east of here. If we can broadcast a warning or signal, maybe we can alert other survivors, and maybe even find a cure." Rachel agreed, though her heart pounded. "It's dangerous, but it might be our only chance." That night, Rachel's group prepared for the mission. The weight of their choices pressed heavily. Each step outside the enclave meant exposure to lurkers, infected minds, and the unknown. As they slipped through the darkness, the forest seemed alive with threats. Shadows shifted at the edge of vision, whispers echoed on the wind. Suddenly, a cry pierced the night, a survivor, bitten and turning. Panic erupted. Rachel's voice cut through the chaos. "We don't have time. Keep moving." The group pressed on, hearts pounding, muscles burning. The path to the tower was littered with remnants of failed attempts and lost souls. At last, the tower loomed above the treetops, a beacon of fragile hope. Rachel climbed the rusted stairs, the wind howling around her. She reached the transmitter, hands trembling as she activated the equipment. Static crackled, then a voice, "This is Stonebridge. Survivors, listen. The infection is evolving. The lurkers control minds. Trust no one without proof. Find the sanctuary, resist the darkness." As the message repeated, Rachel felt a surge of determination. The nightmare was far from over, but their fight had only just begun. Behind her, footsteps echoed, a lurker had found them. The battle for Dead America was reaching its breaking point. End of Part 7. Ready for Part 8 to conclude the story? The lurker's footsteps echoed behind Rachel, sharp and relentless. She spun just in time, raising her weapon. The creature lunged, half human, half shadow, its eyes glowing with unnatural malice. The battle was desperate, fierce, a blur of motion and willpower. Behind her, the others fought their own battles, fending off the creeping darkness that sought to claim their minds and bodies. The forest around the communications tower became a chaotic battleground, where every moment could mean life or death. Rachel's shot found its mark, and the lurker collapsed with a strangled cry. But victory was fleeting, more lurkers emerged, drawn by the commotion. "We have to get out, now!" Marcus shouted, pulling Rachel down the stairs. They fled into the dense trees, adrenaline propelling them through the night. The radio message still echoed in their minds, a beacon for any survivors listening: trust no one without proof. The weight of those words settled heavy in their hearts. Back at the Enclave, Eleanor rallied the remaining survivors. "We hold this place as long as we can. Every moment we buy gives others a chance." Rachel and her group returned, breathless but alive. The fight was far from over. The infection's new face challenged everything they believed about survival, trust, and humanity itself. Yet amid the darkness, a fragile hope remained, hope that one day, the nightmare of Dead America could end. That survivors could rebuild, reclaim what was lost, and find light in a world overshadowed by shadows. Rachel looked to the horizon, the first hints of dawn breaking through the trees. The battle had only just begun, but so had the fight for their souls. End of Part 8. If you want, I can help you with a summary or title cards for each part to make your audiobook even more engaging.